Welcome, everybody, to this session today. We've got a couple of exciting panels. I think what's happening at the moment is, we're into this session in time where a new way of thinking and working is required across all aspects of the value chain. And I mean, that's not just media production as well, transportation, everything. So today we've got two panels of industry experts, and we're going to explore the evolution of remote production. And of course, the switch to cloud and IP-led media channels. And we'll take a look at really what some of the things have been going on actually pre-COVID, because remote production's been really around for pre-COVID. SVT is going to do a great case study on the Alpine ski event where that'll work, as well as we'll look at some key points of IP remote production facilities, and Gary from LinkedIn is going to tell us about their session. So before we get on with that, I'm going to chair the second panel, and Per from Net Insight is going to chair the first panel. But Per, just a quick question to you. I am curious about Net Insight's direction currently.
Thanks, Dan. I agree. I think this is going to be a very exciting panel with a lot of leaders from different areas in our industry. Yes, Net Insight, it's been, while it's been a very challenging time for everyone in the industry the last year, it's also been a very exciting time from a Net Insight development point of view. Last year started with us selling our cloud-based low latency streaming platform, really was a CDN in the cloud platform to Amazon. But we took all that knowledge, that architecture, and developed our Nimbra Edge platform, which is really an open platform for on-ramp ingest and for also doing global media delivery using the cloud. Just a few months later, we also bought Aperi, which was probably many of you know, one of the leading IP gateway companies. And they had a very innovative virtualization stack, which really allowed you to see the whole appliance, not just the software, as fully virtualized. And we leveraged that virtualization stack, the vStack, into also our existing Nimbra platform. So probably the biggest transformation the last year has been taking all that knowledge, the cloud-based and the virtualization, microservice architecture, making really the new Nimbra 1060 into 100 gig IP processing and media processing platform, and really allowing you to do hundreds of encoding, decoding instances in a single appliance while supporting the new IP standards and workflows of the traditional -6, -2 platforms, as well as the new 2110 platforms. So a lot of exciting transformation, both in the industry, and that's also reflected and mirrored in our development.
Well, that's impressive. You guys have really made great advancements and actually leading the industry. So with that, I'll let you get on with the first panel.
Thanks, Stan. Yes, let me introduce the first panel. With me today, we have a really interesting set of people. We have Adi Granberg, who is CTO of Swedish Television, really one of the pioneers in remote production. We have Hugh Diamond from Blackbird. Blackbird is doing truly at-home production and editing platforms. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. And we have Jeremy Dujardin, one of the also leaders and thought leaders and CTO Tata Communications with me. So I was thinking starting with Ade and getting a little bit the broadcaster perspective on remote production. Ade, you and Swedish Television truly been pioneers. You did your first remote production big events for over 10 years ago. But can you tell us what was the reasons for you to start doing remote productions?
The main reason for SVT to do remote production was for the Olympics 10 years ago. What was the limitation of access we did for entering London for the Olympic Games. We were only allowed to have 65 persons there, and I wouldn't fill that up with technical crew. I would like to fill it up with some crew and people that was really doing something for the viewers. It was a technical really focus for the viewers. So we really extended the cables from everything from sound editing and cameras from London to Stockholm, and used the utilization of our technical facilities in Stockholm and just hosted it in London. And that as well made the technical crew could stay at home to do the production in London. So that was the main reason for it. And actually, for the viewers, they get more content than they ever had done before. So it was a really success from the viewer point of view. And it was really a success from an economical point of view as well for SVT in that sense. Then, of course, it was a tremendous, really strange travel to do that, because the TV crew, my crew, the technical crew was really used to get on site to work with events. That's a part of the game. And we really took that away from the crew. So from that perspective, it was not a technical new invention. It was only a production perspective of using the money better and actually get more content that we could do before. So it was not technical driven, it was production driven, but it took a few years to really understand that and how we can really make better utilization of the investment we have done in Stockholm.
I remember you typically say it was not really the technology challenge; it was a cultural challenge to get everyone involved to change their workflows and their thinking. Can you elaborate on that?
And it still are. Definitely still. It's not a technical challenge at all. It's a mindset challenge. We have the same workflow in televisions for the last 60, 70 years. And then we have changed some cables and some protocols and some standards, but we have not changed the way we worked. To do remote production, we could do it easily as when we went over to fiber connectivity for the sound and the cameras. Then you can extend the cables in how far as you would like to do. So it's only been a mindset, a culture set, and of course a feeling of redundancy, of secureness and everything. And before I started on SVT, I was a co-owner of a production Obi truck company building Obi trucks. So you have really single points of failure in Obi trucks, uplinks, etc., which you don't see in a regular production, where you can really take away in a remote production. But the technology to do remote production have been there for 15 years. It's only the culture, how to use it, how we used to work, how we like to work, etc., etc. And of course, the biggest culture thing is that we would like to be on site to do it. It's a part of the game. And I have been there as well, so I totally understand it. But it doesn't gain the viewer so much more.
But I think you're right there also on redundancy. When saving money on the production, you can really put money on where it makes sense, like redundant these things instead, right?
Yeah, and you can really see that before you went out on the road with an Obi truck, you were moving technology for 5 million euro around. You have insurance company, you can hit the snowstorm, you can get in the ditch, you can whatever, you can get robbed, whatever. But when you do remote production, you're using infrastructure, working for other kind of things, you only move a small amount of pieces out where you should belong, and you use the technical facilities in a really controlled environment. And then you can buy redundancy with a fiber network or whatever you need in a much, much better way. And we haven't developed the technology for that. We have developed the technology to be on an Obi truck in a controlled environment out there. So if we have been better to develop the technology, we've been much, much further forward in this road than we are right now.
Cool. You also probably did the world's biggest remote production when you did the Alpine World Skiing. I know you can share some slides. Could you just go through what you did and the workflows you actually did to do that huge production. And also would be interesting to understand again, what were the reasons for you for doing this and the benefits?
First of all, the reason that SVT went into the alpine skiing and do remote production out of it was to build up technology where we can put back to the TV company after the championship. I didn't have a goal to do the world biggest remote production for an event. I was doing this to prepare SVT to really get on the remote production train, to have one facility where we have the technology and could have different kind of studios outside in Sweden, and you can control it from wherever you are. So the setup for Åre, which was 80 cameras, is that the camera was on site, the technology was in Stockholm, but the control surface as well was in Åre. But the control surface, the director's sitting area, could be placed anywhere with the internet connectivity. So you were really separating the match, the control area and the technology from each other. And the good thing with that, when we look back now, is that it's take much faster to set everything up. You connect the camera and you get directly access to the control area, and you can see that everything is working, and you can switch between cameras from one arena to another arena. You get more flexible system around it. So it was the driver behind it. Then, of course, you can add on the environmental thing about it. Less traveling, less people need to be on site, in this case in Åre, and it's quite a big amount of people that are on site for that kind of big event. And remote production doesn't really care if it's 80 camera or 2 cameras. You can really expand it quite easily for that reason as well. So for me, the reason for the alpine skiing in Åre was actually to prepare the company to change the culture and have one goal to face it. So that was the main reason for it. And of course, to really separate the technology from what you are really doing. So you get a new workflow in that. So the technical operating manager could focus on the technology, the camera can focus on the camera, and the director can focus on whatever they are focused on, what location suits them best as well. Then, of course, in this case, we get a huge, fantastic advantage of redundancy. From Åre, we had dual path, secure fiber connectivity. In Stockholm, we got 4 different kind of vision mixer where we have redundancy in. We got 2 routers, we have communication system, we have different sound rooms, which we never would allow to have on site. Then, of course, we have redundant power, we have battery backup in Stockholm, facilities that we use every day without need to have generators on because of an event. So it's a lot of small reasons putting this together, but the main reason was to prepare SVT as a production company and broadcaster to really work remotely. So now we implemented that workflow for all our news, which are located on 14 different locations in Sweden, but they're using the same technical facilities. So that was the main reason for it. Then, of course, you get all the advantage around the environmental, the traveling, the much easier de-rig and rig time, which is much smoother right now with fiber connectivity. And we now start to see what we will move in the way we work right now, because when you have fiber connectivity, remote production, when you have the connectivity up, I would know if it works or not working. I can see that on the measurement inside the computer instead of putting in the camera, is it working, is it not working, do I need to clean something? I can really see that now on the shots. We're really moving forward in the way we are working with TV production. And then, of course, 1 hour after an event like Åre, I can do another ski event. In this case, we did the Vasaloppet in the same facilities as we did the World Championships. So that's as utilization again. Fantastic.
And I think and only 2 weeks later, you were a host broadcaster for the skiathlon World Championship, right? So you could use really the same setup, and that was not even in the same city. You just moved. So again,
No,
I
that
guess
was
that would have been
in
really
Östersund,
tough.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the biathlon, the same system, the same equipment. Of course, we have done a lot of lesson learned from Åre that we could really gain on in Östersund when we did the biathlon. And then it was really, really smoothly. And a month ago, we had a ski competition again in Åre, a World Cup this time, not the World Championship. And I think we did the rig in 1 day and we did the D rig in 4 hours. And all of you guys out there doing some ski host broadcasting know it's take lots more time to de-rig or rig an alpine ski competition. But now we have that kind of time. But that changed the market, of course. And that changed a lot of mindset and a lot of structural things that we are used to do since 70 years ago. But it works.
Thanks, Ada. Really great presentation, great insights. I think we could have probably spent another half hour just talking about this. I'll come back and talk a little bit also what you see as the trends. I want to move over now to Jeremy, CTO of Media Business with Tata Communications. I mean, Jeremy, with networks really being at the hearts and also data centers, the heart of remote production, I guess remote production is something you both are doing a lot and also looking forward to.
Yeah, thanks, Per, and good to be here on the panel. So yeah, I mean, obviously, like as you mentioned, as Adam mentioned, I mean, the network is obviously a critical component of providing. It really enables the possibility of remote production. When you think about it, you obviously still need to do the image acquisition at the venue, and what used to be a cable that you can easily trace out and protect on site is now something that's extending hundreds and thousands of miles, running through conduits along highways, in the form of a fiber network, and you open yourself up to a lot of vulnerability there. So having your resiliency, that can ensure the connectivity is obviously critical to ensure that the production is going to happen without fail. So making sure, I mean, providing the connectivity is not enough. You need to make sure you have a system and a platform that's going to provide the redundancy, multiple paths, hitless failovers. When there is an issue, because there will be an issue. There is no doubt that when you're doing a live event, you will have a fiber cut. Especially the amount of events that are being done remotely today. So you have to protect for that. And the latency. Obviously, now you're extending hundreds and thousands of miles. Having something that has low latency network that can have low latency to provide the same experience when you're switching between the cameras is obviously another critical aspect. So yeah, for as an example, from a Tata Communications standpoint, we built out a global network. It's probably the largest video media network in the world, using the NetInsight platform. It's 100 gig capable, multiple 100 gig paths. So we can provide the bandwidth and the reliability that's expected for these remote production opportunities.
True. You've been doing a number of actually quite big tier one events when it comes to remote production. Are there any examples you can talk about?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We've been doing remote production, services for broadcasters for over 5 years. Some of the examples are things like, within India, we've wired up all the cricket stadiums, badminton, kabaddi, and for Star specifically, we've been providing very high-end productions back to their facility in Mumbai, and we're doing 24 plus cameras. For a lot of these events, again, hitlessly protected, extending, everything from, comms and, EVS machines, and the like, and data feeds and super slow-mo, cameras for Star. We've done, hundreds of motorsport events, around the world, for remote production. Another great use case, on kind of one of the lower end spectrums. I mean, because it's not just fiber that people are doing remote production on now. And it's not just J2K or uncompressed video, but you can do very high quality productions just even using internet for first last mile. You mentioned the Nimbra Edge platform that you rolled out. Where you doing using some of those devices to bring 4, 6, 8 cameras out of a venue for some of the soccer leagues in the U.S. in conjunction with Vista WorldLink, over simply 100 meg internet connections. So providing that connectivity for multiple cameras over the internet as a first mile back into our network, and then down to Vista WorldLink, which is now an NEP company, where they're then producing those feeds, and then we're redistributing that content back out again over the internet to regional sports networks. So the spectrum really varies in terms of the types of remote production use cases that we've supported over the years.
Yeah, that's interesting. That hybrid of managed and unmanaged IP networks and still being able to provide the redundancy and low latency there. Also, Tata, you were featured in a quite large report that came out this spring from Omdia on remote production, and it showed some really interesting figures. Can you walk us through some of those
Sure.
figures?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we did a detailed report and study on remote production because we have been so heavily involved in that. Without question, it's one of the top priorities across executive leaders for media companies, especially within obviously the broadcaster space and the OTT space. That's one of the main drivers for remote production from our perspective is all the content that is now being produced for these streaming platforms. I mean, with streaming, you're not limited to your typical broadcast schedule on a linear feed that's being that's reaching a set number of affiliates or users in a traditional broadcast. Now with streaming, it's pretty much limitless with the amount of content that can be delivered, and that's just created a tremendous appetite for events that are being produced, which does drive a lot of these new technologies and leveraging remote production, because in order to cost effectively produce hundreds or thousands of events to feed the beast, so to speak, with respect to the streaming platforms, the cost point has to be much lower than what you would do with a traditional broadcast. So we've just some of the statistics. I mean, we do expect along with that over 50, close to 50% of growth each year over the next 2 years. Fiber and IP are obviously the core drivers of that. Fiber being over 50% of the delivery for these remote production events. But IP, as I mentioned, doing this over the internet, is just as important and is extremely fast growing. The technologies that you're able to implement to provide resiliency over the internet, and again keep that price point down, is really important. And even from our perspective, I mean, we're doing over 1,500 events a year, remote production events a year, and we see that doubling in the next 18 months.
Oh, yeah, that's impressive figures. And as you said, I think also with OTT delivery now, we see a quite big growth on the more tier 2 types of events, and they truly benefit from the remote production, cost efficiency and agility of that. When it comes to now enter the COVID, what would you say the last year during COVID has been the biggest change from the events you did before, from workflow, from network perspective? What's the biggest change?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and like Adam mentioned, and I mean, for the past 10 years, people have been doing remote production, so this is nothing new, but it certainly became a necessity now. So as Adam mentioned, it was definitely a cultural. And there is still a cultural obstacle to overcome for people to embrace this, but when COVID hit, that kind of went out the window because you didn't really have a choice. If you had an event to produce, then you couldn't get people on site to produce it. So you had to embrace remote production. So that certainly is, no doubt accelerated the shift towards remote production. The other interesting shift and acceleration has been the move to cloud production or virtual production and distributed production. So not only could you not get people on site, you couldn't even get people into a central location to produce some of these events. So people were literally producing events from their bedrooms, from their garages, from their homes. And you would have your audio person in one location, your technical director in another location, all collaborating on a single production in a distributed fashion. So that has really unlocked a lot of possibilities or made people realize that the possibilities and the benefits of doing this the longer term.
And actually, that's a perfect reason to go over to the next member in our panel. Blackbird, you truly has a distributed editing platform where people, they literally sit at home doing their production. So, can you tell us a little bit of the use cases you have seen, both, of course, before the pandemic, but also now? And I know you are working with Tata Communications. So perhaps you can just go through some of the use cases you are doing.
Of course, yes. Thanks, Per. So I think there's a few things that I think are really fascinating, actually, in terms of the dynamic and the culture, to pick up on what Adi started off with, which is, first of all, the assumption that we need to start all of this discussion assuming that everybody and everything is remote. That's a fundamental cultural shift in mindset. And I think, from a Blackbird perspective, we've constructed a platform that allows end users to create professional grade content, regardless of where the content or indeed the infrastructure is actually running. So there's a really interesting overall use case that we've been working with Jeremy and the Tata team on, which kind of brings a lot of those topics together. The notion of being able to work remotely, the notion of your content being totally remote, you don't need any direct access to it at all. And then also being able to perform what is still a very high grade of content creation upon it. So essentially what we have with Tata is, as part of their managed service stack, they're hosting nodes of our Blackbird Edge software, which is ultimately the software which is responsible for ingesting. And we say ingesting, it would be indexing files or capturing stream-based content. And in the Tata infrastructure, they're actually responsible for all of the compute layer, all of the networking infrastructure. Essentially, we're an enablement layer within that stack. And we've actually got about 5 different clusters of our Blackbird Edge servers running in some strategic locations with them. So they're ingesting live stream content from events. That could be anything from finished broadcast streams to individual camera ISOs that are being fed into the overall contribution network. And then essentially we're ingesting it and we're enabling access to that content through our fully web-based JavaScript editor. So the end user and the use case there is that somebody in their bedroom, in their office, in any location across the globe, regardless of where they are, and we've constructed the platform so that latency becomes not an issue, but they're still able to create and manage video material and create very high grades of content. So within about 5 seconds of that live stream, or within about 5 seconds of a file landing within the Tata infrastructure, users on approximately 2 megabits of bandwidth, which, if you can imagine, in a COVID world where everyone's suddenly working at home, the bandwidth constraints that are inherent with that and the spikes in domestic internet usage, that's a real constraint. In that particular scenario, it's totally impractical to give everyone workstation grade access. But essentially, they're able to create a fully featured edit with graphics, with anything up to 16 video channels, 36 audio channels, full multi-track, with video transitions, blurring, and a variety of other advanced features that you typically think you need a fully blown desktop and local media access, but actually all the content stays in the Tata infrastructure. None of it egresses, none of it moves out. And essentially then the final stage of the workflow is that users are able to take their edit, their decisions, which could be anything from a social package or a social clipping decision right up to that fully featured edit. And then ultimately they engage with a delivery process, which turns our edge server node into a render engine, which will then render back against the original source and deliver a high quality asset from that original source. So essentially you've got a full high quality video pipeline, which is being fed from users on a very, very low grade workstation in a browser, no software, no local instance of an NLE, and they can then be delivering to back into the Tata infrastructure. They could be delivering to their own content delivery network, into their own CMS platform, off to their social platforms, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, so on and so forth. But again, they never need direct access. So it draws some really interesting parallels with where Adi first started the discussion about decoupling infrastructure, the functions and the users as three different entities. And that's something we've been doing with our customers for a long time, but obviously the partnership with Tata Communications on extracting the value from the streams and files that are passing through that infrastructure has really, enabled a new grade of workflow and a new grade of quality of output of content, which we've seen, particularly useful during a period where direct access to anything is questionable, even if you live within very short order or short distance to your physical office. If you can't get there, effectively the content is worthless. So let's make it available, let's make it usable, and let's make the output high value, high quality, and delivery as fast as humanly possible.
Yeah. No, thanks you. I think in today's COVID times, this is a very relevant workflow and really next generation. I think this is a lot where people are moving. It would be good to hear back again from Ada and Jeremy. Where are you seeing now, hopefully soon, a post-COVID? Where are we moving? Are we going to move back? What are we bringing with us, and where are we heading when it, as next steps in remote and distributed production? Ada, do you want to start?
I can definitely start. I definitely don't hope that we get back. I hope we have learned something from it. Even then, I can feel from my production heart that the lesson is a little bit boring in one sense because you're not on site. We need to move now and really taking away the CTO discussion around quality to focus on the viewer's perspective of quality and produce for the end users instead of producing television for the CTOs. And that comes to best of breed quality, what is quality, and have that discussion ongoing, because I think we can do more content much better if we start to do remotely. I'm quite sure about that. And we need to do technical develop now to see what we can afford as quality for production and how we will distribute it and connect the production with the distribution much more than we have done, especially inside broadcast before. We really need to focus what is important for the viewers much, much more than what's focus for the industry, because right now the TV industry have been a big isolated industry together with some manufacturers. Right now we are a quite small industry in a bigger world, and how can we learn from that? And that's a culture change from the workflows to the technology we use and how we know it. So we need to be more interested in what development can do for us. How can we produce in the cloud, even if it's on my premises or on someone else's premises? How can we get the fiber connectivity to really understand how we will have a business around that, so that will not rise and be a blocker, that there can be an enabler for it. And the way we work now post-COVID is more effective, I think, of time spent, etc., etc. So we really need to focus on when do I need to be on site and when I don't need to be on site, and the COVID have helped us through that lesson. Then, of course, it's reason to be together and have workshops, etc., and cooperate together. But we really need to use this window. Even it's a catastrophe that hit us, we need to use it, because I think we can really gain fantastic things from it and learn so much things from it.
I totally agree, and I think your point there to quality and CTO broadcast, and we need to move to more personalized experience, right? People, especially younger people, they want more personalized viewing, more interactive viewing. And then the good thing with remote is you have all the feeds in the production area, and we had this discussion when we did the design and personalized. If you want to, today's production is a huge waste of content. You have 40 cameras on a big soccer event, but you just send one stream to the consumers. And so it's. I think you're totally right. There's a lot of new opportunity in how to do the content, produce the content, and what you send out to the consumers. Jeremy, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, I echo everything that was said. I mean, I think, I mean, personally, I believe, the train has kind of left the proverbial station. The march towards, doing the majority of events as a remotely produced is where the industry is certainly going. I do foresee more and more, cloud-based and distributed workflows. At the same time, it'll depend on the event. Like I said, there'll be some instances where people still want to congregate and come together, but will people be going to site? I don't see that. I don't see that going backwards, and certainly in the next 5-10 years, the norm will be the remotely produced event for sure.
Cool. I think you spoke about it in your presentation in a very neat way, but anything you want to add to it?
I think there is one other item I would just pick out, which was mentioned earlier, again, partly between Adi and Jeremy's discussion, but also the focus on other things which are continuing us on this path. COVID will change things, but there are other aspects that are also more permanent. Things like environmental sustainability of not having to send teams to events, and the notion of being able to do things again remotely. There's a great awareness in the market and growing on a customer's perspective to have environmental aspects considered into their overall modeling with suppliers and vendors, and that becomes about delivering smart solutions that are efficient. And also being able to prove that they're the right decision to do for sustainability purposes over the long term. So I think that's the warning sign for the future. But the immediate situation that we've been in has really opened people's eyes, and I think that's a secondary parallel I would draw to this whole situation, but a much longer one.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. I totally agree to that one. So thanks to all. Great insights, a lot of experience on remote production, and a lot of good knowledge and experience we can bring into the future. So Stan, with that, I think I'll leave back to you for the second panel discussion.
Yeah, that's great. We certainly covered a lot of ground there, and I think Jeremy really pinned things there when he showed a graph there of 47% growth in remote production. And I'm just going to start with Chris here from Zebras. Were you seeing that? And I think it's important, obviously, for the industry to all get together and focus on this.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. We've been offering these types of services for years, having been a relatively young company. We don't have investment in legacy infrastructure, so all we've had is IP. to craft new models from and to provide services to customers. And we've been coming at it from both levels, I guess, trying to tackle the tier one behemoths of the industry and show them what's possible. Actually, show the tier two and tier three operators that they could achieve more with less. And we've had phenomenal growth over the last few years, and COVID was certainly an accelerant on that. It's like someone poured a whole can of gasoline right on top of it. So it's been phenomenal for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to switch over to Gary here from LinkedIn. Gary, you've been working on remote production and tying facilities for a while. We've talked a lot about 2110 and how you've tied all things together. So I'll bring up your drawing here, and maybe you can just discuss that for a minute.
Sure. This diagram is kind of speaking to what we're trying to do in the future, kind of our next step. We have had our facilities tied together with 2022-6 for 5+ years now. We had started with some, low bit rate encoding to go between the systems, but we really needed improved performance, which is when we got on board the NetInsight MSR platform and tie all of our facilities together that way. And our move to 2110 within our facilities, the MSRs remain valid in that we can now take embryonics SFPs into the front of the media acceleration cards, and now those MSRs can be 2110 senders receivers on our network, and then we are able to pass that media through the DTM tunneling provided by the MSRs. What this is showing is what we're looking to do is we're calling camera to cloud. I'm sure that's kind of a common topic, but how do we now interact with cloud technology? Because we've been doing remotes and tying facilities together, and kind of the model and the thinking around it was we want any control room to connect to any of our venues or studios and manage resources, whether that be human or technology resources. So, kind of looking at it as I don't have 5 streaming encoders in 5 different locations. I just have 5 streaming encoders in the Bay Area. And if we have an issue or a problem, we can route to another device in another location and continue a production. So that was kind of the thinking. I loved listening to the first panel. We were in line with a lot of what the other groups are doing in terms of, thinking in terms of resources, centralizing where our control rooms are and how all of that works. Cloud has changed that a little bit. It just seems like the logical next step in a lot of ways, particularly when you're talking about remotes and what's possible. The production tools that we're using for cloud is the Grass Valley AMP platform, along with the NetInsight Nimbra Edge. Those are 2 core technologies that allow us to get our streams from wherever they are to where they need to be. In the past, we have done productions where we would have our CEO in Dublin, and we would produce that show from Mountain View, California. So you have speed of light issues and other things that, complications there. But with cloud, now we can actually regionalize where our tech is. We can have cloud tech in West Europe and be able to run shows there and have a much higher quality of show. Back to the diagram, this is about how do we get some of that media. Our core facilities would be 2110. We want to be able to trunk to some type of a gateway which can receive that tunnel and that media. And this is showing how we would do ingest direct into cloud storage. So that's kind of big for us, because it's not for LinkedIn. There's more than just doing live streams for whether it's productions for lines of business within LinkedIn, but LinkedIn Learning is is a large component of LinkedIn. we need to have ways of getting, as we make our move into Azure, we need to have ways of getting content into cloud storage and have remote editing and the whole post-production process happen as quickly as possible. So this is one of the. Go ahead,
that's impressive. What you guys have been working on. Rupert, can you just add in some of the things that are going on? Rupert's from Jigsaw 24, and some of the benefits that the people are seeing in the Soho area with remote production.
Yeah, so essentially the guys in Soho have traditionally worked in a cluster of post-production in and around the central London area, and that's traditionally been a beneficial thing, certainly back in the days when you carried stuff around Soho and you had kind of film cans and tape and all that kind of thing, and you went from the post video guys to the audio guys and the rest of it. But obviously with data, that's become less and less of a kind of need. And so as that's developed, we initially proposed remote production as a way of freeing up money. So instead of having your hot kit in a post house in Soho, we suggested to the customers that it might be sensible to put it in a data center. And obviously over time, that's gradually taken hold, not from a commercial perspective, but clearly when COVID hit, that technology took on a slightly different but similar perspective. So people have enabled themselves to work from home, their editors to work from home, their producers to review edits remotely, and all of that technology has accelerated, beyond anybody's expectation, to the point now where I think customers are starting to wonder what shape of kind of bricks and mortar they're going to come back to, how much of that they're going to retain, and how much of it they're going to change back to the old way of doing things.
Yeah, I think Adam mentioned a great thing in the first panel there, kind of the culture change and where things are going, and where we're, all a bunch of technical dudes on the call here, and we want to make things great and wherever, but there is that. And Gary, you had an advantage. You really started right out of the gate with tying things together. With remote studios and things like that. So as you were bringing in people to do those things, was there a culture change?
Everything that Addie was talking about resonated. It was definitely a culture change, and to try to get operators and producers to understand, it doesn't really matter if it's 40 feet, 100 feet, 400 miles, 1,000 miles away. If we're focused on what's in front of us, our multi-viewers, our equipment, the vision mixer, all of those things, then what happens back there, we're all on intercoms, regardless of where the other end is. But it took a while. I think the first time was 2016 when I ran a remote production in parallel. There was a team producing that within the venue, but we did back all of video and audio to our control rooms, and had a group of ops and producers in the room to show them, hey, this is how this can work. So it was kind of spoon feeding a bit, but it's definitely a challenge, that mindset, breaking the mindset.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to ask Chris here just a question. You did some stuff for Google a little while back, and how did they get the culture change when they could do things a lot faster?
Yeah, so we were approached by a company called Creative Technology out of the US, part of NEP Live Events, when they saw what was possible with the technology stack of being able to deliver, live feeds from somewhere to somewhere else, essentially using only a network connection, and asked us to come along and help them with Google Cloud Next and Google I/O summits out in Mountain View and San Francisco. And the Mountain View was used as a test bed, but it was all on one campus there, all open air. They run fiber between all the venues and then a network between all the venues. And we did a side-by-side there. And it compared comparatively to fiber. It was a little bit slower because we were encoding feeds, delivering them instead of just using fiber. But once it sunk in that actually they didn't have to be in those tents right next to each other all on one campus. They could spread this event across the country, or technically across the world, by using this type of technology. So they bought in completely. So the next event was Google Cloud Next. We were running 45 simultaneous streams from kind of 6 or 7 different venues across San Francisco, shoving them all into the cloud as a kind of live video asset. From that point, they could be archived, edited, streamed directly to YouTube, redistributed to the other venues, so they could use 3 or 4 other rooms as overflow for like the keynote speech, for instance, and doing it all through the cloud. But the big kicker was being able to improve their editing workflows. What used to be run on what they called the sneaker net, guys in sneakers running around collecting hard drives from all the different mixing desks, then send off to editors. The workflow was like a 3-week workflow to get every single session finally uploaded to YouTube, which was just like a rough cut, putting a slate on the beginning and the end. And we turned that around so that every single session was rough cut uploaded to YouTube within 8 hours of the session ending, which across something like 420 sessions across 4 days was pretty phenomenal in terms of a step change in speeding up a workflow.
Yeah, that's impressive. And I think we also have to remember that, it's just not all about broadcast events. This is a huge market share that's everybody's into video all over the place.
That's it, 100%. Yeah. I think every example that's been talked about on this webinar so far, I think we're talking about less than 5% of the addressable market. All of the big productions, the big global brands, the Formula Ones, the major football leagues, but there's a huge mass of events across all tiers that could be using this technology, and I think some of them don't even know that it's available. They just lean on service providers to provide them satellite uplinks and fiber circuits to do some of this distribution and lean on a lot of those technologies. Whereas I think actually what we should be doing is coming together to do shows like this, to do little webinars like this, to do an education piece to the market. And I think, there's more than enough business out there for everyone to go and tackle. We just need to educate the customer that these are viable, not just viable alternatives, but step changes in terms of cost savings, not just in a direct technical replacement, but everything that's been addressed today by not having to send workforces to venues, etc.
Well, certainly cost is a big thing, and Rupert, you certainly are seeing big things in cost changes, and it's a lot cheaper to do things now.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. Earlier on, we were talking about OB trucks and how and where you deploy. What we're seeing a lot of is the use of NDI and SRT in areas we wouldn't necessarily have expected to find them. So where perhaps 702110 or 2022 would have been the kind of first choice, the very good second choice has been NDI, and we've seen a lot of fairly substantial and surprising productions using it. So the one that springs to mind, no pun intended, is Springwatch. Last year, when things locked down, the process of delivering that became a little trickier than it had previously been. And we effectively managed to deliver that using a combination of Amazon and NDI processing engines and so on from Gallery, which was something of a revelation for all, and was a huge success. And I think they've gone on to do Winter Watch and Autumn Watch, and I think Spring Watch is coming around again. They're going to basically deliver the same way. So it's kind of like an OB truck in the sky, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, no, that is cool. We actually did have a question that came in on the unification of broadcast workflows and enterprise workflows. So I think that
it goes back the other way. What we've seen is large corporates who've been looking at 2110 and discovering that some of the interoperation isn't quite there or wasn't quite there. They've often moved into the NDI domain to kind of patch the kind of bits that haven't quite got the kind of interoperation done yet.
Yeah. We did have a question coming up here. Is it a good idea to have our business depend on proprietary protocols such as NDI? I think that's a whole webinar.
I would say emphatically yes. I mean, just from a practical point of view, what we've seen is SMPTE move slowly, New Tech move quickly. So I can email Andrew Cross with a problem and get a response the next day, and it's fixed. Obviously, getting a SMPTE standard moved so that it works is another thing. I mean, I thought what we saw with DPP and MXF, where standards are by definition quite wide, and so you can have two different manufacturers who interpret them slightly differently, and their protocols don't quite hit in the middle. With NDI, because it's owned and responsive, you can move much more swiftly. And I think in the situation we found ourselves in the last year, that's been a massive, massive benefit to us.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I guess one of the questions that does come up here on that, I'll pass this over to Chris for a minute. Where are we on the quality scale? Is it pushing stuff out the door, or is it getting back to quality? Where does that sit?
No, I mean some of the we deal with all customers. So, we're pushing horse racing at a massive 3 megabits per second around the world, but we're also producing Scottish Premier Football with 30 megabit per second mezzanine feed delivered to 6 or 7 different partners simultaneously. But I think the cloud opens up the possibilities to do things like that. So you can deliver relatively, for a distribution point of view, a high quality mezzanine feed, but then use cloud transcoding engines to produce different variants for everyone. It's no longer just making one world feed available and putting it on satellite and saying, there it is. You're able to customize and fit customers' downstream ingest profiles a little bit more easily and more accurately. The feed's going to be transcoded anyway, so why move it around at 30 megabits per second to get to a venue, just to have them, the first thing they do is decode it and re-encode it to 5 megabits per second? Why not give them the ability to create their variant from the cloud and deliver it direct to their ingest point? And I think the cloud is opening up these workflows, and IP and the democratization of the content, I think, is opening up those opportunities for vendors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to just pass it over to Gary here for a second. Where are you on the quality scale for the type of stuff you're working on?
Well, when COVID hit, AMP was not ready for prime time. We moved on to the Zoom and the Blue Jeans and those platforms. So if you're just talking about quality and what the viewers, the consumers of the content are seeing, it was pretty bad at that point. So now as we get onto these platforms and using some of the protocols that folks were talking about, our quality is kind of getting back on par with where we were pre-COVID.
Yeah, because you certainly worked on a full bandwidth infrastructure right from the day one. That was your plan on that, which is good. Per, I'm going to ask you to come in here. We've covered a lot of stuff. We're getting close to the top of the hour. What are your thoughts on what we've heard and kind of your future vision?
No, I think it's been very exciting insights from a lot of people. In both, I really think about the culture of things is so important. I know Ade has pointed this out many times, and of course for everyone, it's nice to be at the big events, to be at at an Olympics, etc. So to sit at home is not always fun for everyone involved in the actual production. So there's a lot of things there as well. What I think happened with the COVID is we are today much more comfortable with the things of using a network, the redundancy it provides, the security it can provide, etc. So, of course, these are things to really think about when you set up the remote production. But I think what experience we had from this year is it works. I think also very interesting was what you talked about, hardware location independent. The remote distributed production is not just about people being distributed. It's also that you can have your hardware, your servers, especially with cloud-based technology. You can be in the public cloud, it can be in a data center, it can be on your private server in the studio. But we also had some events where we actually had the server at the flight cases with together with our Nimbra equipment that was bringing in the camera feeds, but the server that was doing the production was sitting in the same flight case, but the people were dialing in from home and actually doing the production from home, but you had the server on site. So it just shows all the possibilities these new technologies provide. It's the agility, flexibility, and then I think ties back to what Ade said. It's not just about quality or HD 4K. It's really how you produce your content to make it more personalized, to make it a next generation type of TV content or video content. that's very interesting. I also bring with me a lot, as you said, there's definitely unification of many different segments. It's not just broadcast. The same now production workflows we see in the enterprise people when they're doing the town halls. We're talking to enterprise companies, and they want to, improve their quality experience a little bit. As Gary said, they want to have better quality in the distribution, but that also means there's a big benefit of having a better quality in your production, to be able to have a multi-camera production to make it more flexible and more dynamic. That's also part of making the content more attractive. So that unification we can see, which means these new workflows we are doing, moving to IP, moving to cloud, will be much more applicable, not just for the broadcast community.
Yeah, no question about that. And I think we're seeing, a lot of growth in that area of enterprise and people just expecting to have a higher quality. It's been great to have the panel on here today. Appreciate everybody's insights and ideas. I think one of the key elements that Ada hit right at the beginning, this is a real culture change, and we really need to focus on that. So with that, appreciate everybody attending. Thanks again.